Blog Talk Radio.
This is Tyson Dean, and you're kicking it in the WSC Lounge with Jason and Brian, sharing all the latest on wrestling and soap and all your entertainment news.
Hey guys, it's country recording artist Katie Bell Aiken, and you're listening to WSE Lounge.
Hi, this is Eric Bishop, and you're listening to the WSC Lounge. Hey guys, I'm Robert Palmer Watkins. I play Dylan Quartermain on General Hospital, and you are listening to the WSC Lounge.
This is country music singer Amanda Joe, and you are listening to the WSE Lounge.
Hey guys, hello there. This is Ricky Morton of the Rock and Roll Express, and you're listening to WSC Lounge. This is Frank Kennedy. Hey, this is Bo Bagwell, and guess what? You're listening to the WSE Lounge.
This is country music singer Ashley Carson, and you're listening to the WSE Lounge.
This is Mike Blanchard, and you are listening to the WSE Lounge.
Hey y'all, we're Donnie Dixie, and you're listening to the WSE Lounge.
I'm Jeff Jarrett, the founder and CEO of King of the Mountain. Jeff Jarrett.
Hey, this is Kristen Alderson, and you're listening to the WSE Lounge.
Hi, this is Mark Merrill, former Intercontinental Champion with the World Wrestling Entertainment and John Cena, three-time World Television Champion. Don't turn that now, or it's going to be a mess. Did you
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jason Boyd, along with my co-host Brian Vaughn, and welcome to the WSE Lounge. Our guest at this time, ECW original, former two-time ECW Tag Team Champion, two-time WWE Cruiserweight Champion, ladies and gentlemen, Little Guido, also known as Nunzio. Well, welcome to the show.
Nunzio, Little Guido, Damian Stone, James Stone. I had a whole host of names for the past 20-something years. So call me anything you like.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on, Guido. It's an honor to have you.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. What's going on, guys?
In high school, you competed in football. In 1989, you were undefeated, untitled, and unscored upon. Would you say that you wanted to be a pro football player or a pro wrestler?
No, all my life I always wanted to be a pro wrestler. I played on the football team. I actually was a starter on that team. I played halfback alongside with Bobby Gallagher and T.J. Ford. Yes, that was my senior year. We were 10-0. We went undefeated, untitled, unscored upon, which I don't think happened since then. But no. As far as football, I don't think I ever was good enough to be a pro football player. I was captain of my wrestling team when I wrestled in high school and middle school and everything. But as far as wrestling, I always wanted to be a professional wrestler ever since I was 9 years old. My parents used to take my father used to take me to Madison Square Garden. I was actually in Madison Square Garden for WrestleMania 1, and then I performed in Madison Square Garden for WrestleMania 20. Which whoever knew 20 years later, my parents and family would have been there watching me as, you know, my father brought me to WrestleMania 1. So a little bit of history there.
That is an incredible story, Guido.
And another thing about being Sicilian, Italian, my father was Sicilian. He was a big Bruno Sammartino fan. I don't know if you got that growing up, but I definitely heard about Bruno an awful lot growing up.
Well, yeah. Well, Bruno was more or less the 60s and 70s, but I wasn't really watching it. I started watching when I was like 9 years old, and that's when I first started watching. One of the first guys I ever saw was on Channel 9. He used to come on at midnight here in New York, and it was like Superstar Billy Graham and Chief Jay Strongbow, the Wild Samoans. You know, those are the guys. And then as I got into wrestling and even older, you know, then I started to learn about guys that were before me. You know, I didn't know with the internet and stuff, you know, you could find out people that wrestled in the 40s. So as far as Bruno Sammartino, he was kind of retired by the time I started actually watching wrestling. But then when David Sammartino started coming around in the late 80s, Bruno came back to WWE and then was managing him. And, of course, you know, then the internet came out and you were able to look people up and stuff. And of course, now, you know, I know pretty much everybody from looking people up. And I was lucky enough to meet Bruno Sammartino on a few occasions when I was actually in. Well, I guess I could say I'm never in WWE when I met him, because at those years I was there from 2002 to 2000. Basically 9. Then went back it was off for a year. Went back for a year. But he was at that time he was not having on good terms with WWE, I guess. But through the independents, I've met Bruno Sammartino a few times. So that was always like a feather in my cap. I don't think he knew who I was, but I knew who he was.
Absolutely.
Do you believe that if ECW was still around today, that you and Tony Mamaluke would be one of the top tag teams in the world?
Well, I don't know if we were the top tag teams in the world. Right before it went out of business, we were we were the tag team champions. That's, of course, half the people left for the WWE at that time, and there wasn't many people left. But we were happy enough to be there. And if it wasn't for the WWE, I would have never got my opportunity with. If it wasn't for the ECW, I would never got my opportunity with WWE. Of course, going to ECW in late '95. I met Paul Heyman, and he packed me as Little Guido with J.T. Smith in the very beginning, and then a whole host of other partners leading into Tony Mamaluke towards probably the last year. So that was the great part of my life. I was never on TV before until then, and it was like a cult following, and I even knew up until this day what ECW would ever become. I still hear the words, I still hear the names, I still. Even when I was in WWE, Vince McMahon bought it at the time, and I was part of that when they brought I was already there wrestling as Nunzio anyway, but that's when they brought Tony Mamaluke back and Balls Mahoney and like all the other guys, and Tommy Dreamer and they brought Paul E back, and he was running ECW at that time. So I just like I said, if it wasn't for ECW, I don't know if I would have been a part of WWE, which is also a dream come true. As a wrestling fan, you always want to get to the top. If you're a football fan, you want to get to the NFL. If you're a baseball fan, you want to get to the major leagues. If you're a wrestling fan, eventually you'd like to work for Vince McMahon one day, because that's the way the top you can go. So. Oh
yeah, most definitely. I wanted to bring up something you was talking about. You and Tony Mamaluke. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you and Tony Mamaluke also wrestle for Ring of Honor as a tag team?
Yes, we did. Right before I went to after ECW closed down. We did Independence, and then me and Tony did work for Ring of Honor together as a tag team, working with all them guys. And then what happened was I ended up getting signed by WWE, and that's when me and Tony actually had a split at that time. He didn't get signed, so we actually had a little feud. Gabe Sapolsky had had to put us in a feud against each other, and then then I left for WWE, and he stayed there, and then he didn't hook up with me again till Vince McMahon brought back ECW. So actually, we did wrestle for Ring of Honor. That had to be in like 2000, beginning of 2002, because I went to WWE in 2002. So that same year, I was wrestling in Ring of Honor then. I wrestled pretty much for all the major groups except WCW. All the independents, I wrestled for Ring of Honor. I wrestled for TNA for, that wasn't a long term. That was for about a year or so. Then went back and forth with some pay-per-views when they were doing stuff. Of course, I wrestled for ECW. I wrestled for WWE, So I wrestled for the TNA in India when they brought that back. So I wrestled for all the major ones. But WCW I was never able to get to, but because I stayed in ECW, and basically ECW and WCW closed down around the same time.
Interesting.
Absolutely. What was the transition like from Eastern Championship Wrestling to Extreme Championship Wrestling?
Well, I wrestled, believe it or not, I used to wrestle in Eastern Championship Wrestling before, actually, Taz, Tommy Dreamer, Chris Candido, all those guys. I started wrestling there with Tommy Cairo in 1993 when we used to wrestle in the Marketplace in South Philadelphia and the Aztec Club, and Todd Gordon actually brought us in. And what happened was I wrestled there for about a year or so, and then in like 1994 I got hooked up with UWFI. I went to Japan and did shoot wrestling for about 2 years. And when I was down in Japan, that's when Eastern Championship Wrestling, then that's when Taz and Tommy Dreamer started working down there. Then they changed it into Extreme Championship Wrestling. And when I came back in the end of '95, beginning of '96, it was actually already Extreme Championship Wrestling. So I started there in like '92, actually, I guess you could say, for Eastern Championship Wrestling, working with Todd Gordon. We were just doing sports bars. It was me, Johnny Hotbody, Larry Winters, Tony Stetson, Jimmy Snuka, Don Morocco. It was all of us. And then, I was wrestling there as Damian Stone. And then, like I said, I got an opportunity to go to Japan and work for UWFI, which was my first time ever. I was wrestling in sports bars. Next thing you know, when I was in Japan, I was wrestling in front of 20,000 people in, Sumo Hall and all these places. And then when UWFI closed down, I came to ECW, and at that time it already kind of transitioned, so I missed a little bit of the transition. I mean, I was there from pretty much the very beginning when it first started to be Extreme Championship Wrestling, but they were already going for about a year or so. And I knew Tommy Dreamer and all them. I knew Tommy Dreamer and all them before I went to Eastern Championship Wrestling, because when I first started, I used to wrestle for Mario Savoldi, Tommy Savoldi, and I used to wrestle with Taz, Tommy Dreamer, Chris Candido, Tom Brandy, Flex Lavender. I worked with all them guys. I got to know them. And then they were doing independence, and then I went to Eastern Championship Wrestling for a little while. They weren't there yet. And then I got hooked up in Japan, and while I was in Japan is when Dreamer and Taz and all them kind of circulated into ECW. Then when I came home from Japan, when it closed down, I knew Taz and Tommy Dreamer, and I gave them a call, and they said, "Come on down. We'll introduce you to Paul Heyman," and that's how that works.
Wow. Now, to follow up on that question, did you enjoy working for Paul Heyman?
Yeah, I enjoyed working. He was a little bit of a maniac, but yeah, I enjoyed working for him. He gave me many opportunities. I mean, a lot of guys have some gripes, and they could. And there was a time there where, when people always said, "Oh, he wasn't paying us." Yeah, he was missing checks, but he wasn't missing them consecutive. If you got paid, you got paid, and then something would happen, you didn't get paid, and you didn't get paid, then you would get paid for whatever was happening. But the payoff for me was, ECW closed down. I worked the last show. It sucked for everybody. Obviously, we all lost our jobs and stuff, and everybody kind of had to go their own ways, and we all went our own ways. And Paulie went to WWE. He did bring people back periodically as he could, and I was lucky enough to be one of the ones that he was able to get me into the WWE, because when he became the head SmackDown writer is when he had an idea for me, and at the time Jamie Noble, and even though I tag teamed in a match for a while, then he put me with the Cruiserweight division. So, a lot of people do have gripes with him, for whatever reasons, and they might, have the right to have it. But, for me, and it's not that I'm dogging him, because right now I'm out of the wrestling business. I don't need, I'm not being nice to go back to WWE, because I have a great job. I got a retirement system, so I'm in a retirement. I don't need to go to WWE. Do I miss it? Absolutely. But, I'm just saying the truth. I don't have people ask me that all the time about him. He was good to me. Things went wrong in ECW at the end, or whatever happened. Where they say they were trying to get us deals. Were they trying to get us deals? I don't know. And he's not kissing his ass. I got no gripe for him, because if it wasn't for me, I wouldn't have been in ECW, and I wouldn't have been in WWE. I wouldn't have traveled the world. I wouldn't have made the money I made. And, as time goes on, you got to learn that sometimes it's over, and you got to just move on to the real world. That's just what you have to do. And sometimes guys can't do that.
Absolutely. And now that brings us to Barely Legal 97, first ECW pay-per-view. What was the atmosphere in the locker room and the inner goings of ECW at that time when the big event came around?
Well, that was a nerve-wracking, because we almost lost it, as you guys probably know. There was a big thing with the mass transit guy, with all the blood, with New Jack and all that stuff, and a couple other things that we almost made the pay-per-view. That pay-per-view almost didn't go on the air. So it was like we really didn't know if it was happening, if it wasn't happening, and pretty much until the last, couple of weeks. They almost put the kibosh on that. So, but at the time, I remember Paulie had the big meeting with all the guys, and if you look at that Barbed Wire City, is it, or one of those, you actually see Paulie talking to all of us, standing on the stairs, getting us ready. And I was lucky enough to do a dark match. I wasn't actually on that pay-per-view. I did a dark match. I think it was me and Tommy Rich, or Tracy, or Chetty, or something. I forget exactly what it was. But, everybody was pretty psyched. It was when it finally went off, it was the beginning of something. Here we were on MSG and on small stations, and here we were able to be actually on pay-per-view. So we thought at the time, too, it could boost the company, and hopefully get on a bigger channel and, hopefully get more pay-per-views, which we ended up doing a lot more pay-per-views. We ended up doing like 13, which actually I'm one of the very few guys. After the first 2, I was on every single pay-per-view after that. But I was on every pay-per-view card because I did dark match the first, Barely Legal. Then Hardcore Heaven in Fort Lauderdale, I did a dark match. I think it was me and Tracy versus Balls and Axe on the dark. And then once we hit the third pay-per-view, which I believe was November to November, I worked every single pay-per-view until they closed down. So I was lucky enough to actually be on the cards for every single pay-per-view. First 2 nights weren't on. First 2 shows, I didn't make TV. I was on the dark matches, but it was great. I'm just saying that it was exciting. I was a young guy. Yeah, I was just getting on TV. Yeah, I was being on pay-per-view. I was starting to live a dream, and then so for me, it's great. Everybody has their own opinions. Everybody could, say whatever they want. I'm saying for me, it was a great experience. It was a great opportunity for me, and it led to bigger and better things for me. I wrestled in Madison Square Garden. Like I said, I grew up in New York. I used to go there for all the hockey games, and not just like I said, I wrestled in WrestleMania 20 there, but I wrestled in the Garden, 50,000 times. Not 50,000, but many times. Wrestled all over New York City. I wrestled National Coliseum. These are just things that for your own experience, it's great. People get to do that, and I did it multiple times over the course of an 8-year career. A lot of times I do interviews. A lot of people always, a lot of times people are always like, oh, we want to do shoot interviews and stuff. I don't really like doing shoot interviews because honestly, I have no one to bury. And people say, oh, you don't want to bury this guy because you want to go back here, you want to go back there. No, I don't want to go back anywhere. I just don't have. Nobody never really did anything so horrible to me that I need to go out there and bury. That's what people always say. But anytime somebody don't bury somebody, they're always like, oh, you don't want to bury them because you don't want to burn bridges. Well, it's never good to burn a bridge. But nobody did anything so bad to me that I need to go exploit them.
I definitely have a lot of respect for you for that.
Want to let the fans know really quick, if you have any questions for Little Guido, call in at 773-897-6289 and press 1 to be in the hostess view, and we'll be glad to get you on with Little Guido to ask a question. I want to say, Little Guido, that I have always admired your character of Little Guido. You were one of my favorites in ECW. And a question that I wanted to ask you was, who was your favorite opponent in ECW?
I guess in the ECW, I had a lot of favorites. It's always hard to say that, but of course, even from what the fans always said, I loved wrestling with Tajiri and Super Crazy. We supposedly from the fans, I think we had some real good 3-ways and even singles versus, me and Tajiri or me and Super Crazy. Also, I did a good 2-month loop of Rob Van Dam. It was a painful 2-month loop, but we did it. And, that was a lot of fun, too, because getting in the ring with him, with the fan reaction with him and the fans loving him so much, it just made for great atmosphere. But I would say, but then, like I said, Jerry Lynn, I had real good matches with Jerry Lynn, so it's hard to just pick one. It really is hard to just pick one. But, I would have to say, for me, I would say mostly it would be Tajiri and Super Crazy and some of the 3-way dances that we used to have.
Awesome.
Speaking of that, we go to ECW One Night Stand in the WWE 2005. Your opponents, Tajiri, Super Crazy, on this huge stage. What was it like?
Well, I think that was the Hammerstein Ballroom, you mean, right?
Right.
That was 2005. Well, like I said, I was at that time, 2005. I was in WWE already for 3 years. So that was, that was really cool because, it really that one show, that One Night Stand, actually brought back the whole atmosphere of ECW, coming back to the Hammerstein Ballroom, hearing those rapid fans. I was going from ECW to WWE. It's a lot different. ECW, you used to get that rapid fire from the people. We always used to have 2,500, 3,000. It's totally different atmosphere sometimes when you go into an arena like when I wrestled at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. It's hard to get that rapid. Just because you're so used to that them so close up on you. Now you're in front of 25,000 people, where people you look up, you can't even see the end of the rafters. It's still great and it's still a huge pop and it's still awesome, but it's just a different feel when you're in that smaller, close knit environment and especially where the ECW fans were. and that was great because that brought back some great memories. I think because of that show is actually why they ended up bringing back ECW and bringing all the guys back and, trying to revamp it. But like anything, it's very hard to do that. It's very hard to bring back something and let it happen the way it did. ECW, nobody ever expected that stuff to happen. We just were doing what we were doing, and we ended up having this cult following, and it just grew into something. It really did. It grew into something special for all of us. We all loved it, especially guys like Van Dam. Van Dam's one of the guys that had the opportunity to leave for WWE and actually barked at it and didn't want to go right away. He ended up going when basically the place closed down. But that just goes to show you where it was a great environment. All the guys really loved each other. So to bring back that one show, it really felt like at home again. But then when they brought back the ECW and we were running all the arenas 2-3 times a week again, things were changing. Writers were getting involved differently. It wasn't run just by Paulie anymore. And, obviously things changed. And as you could see, after a year and a half or wherever it was, they ended up folding the whole thing up and then taking off from there. And now, you know what? It's kind of like NXT. It wasn't like they wanted to come up with this NXT thing and they think it was going to grow into what it is now. NXT is phenomenal now. The guys they have, it grew into something. It's something. They had Deep South Wrestling. They had the whatever from Louisville first, then they went to Deep South, and then they got the Performance Center, and then they got this NXT going. And like I said, that happened. And to me, I feel like that little by little, that just kept getting better and better and grew, and they started bringing these real great independent guys in, and NXT grew into what NXT is right now. And I enjoy watching NXT. This Cruiserweight Classic, I think it's great for a lot of the guys. I mean, guys like Tony Nese, who I worked on the independents many a times and wondered to myself for the past 2 years, why the hell is this guy not in NXT? Why is he not in WWE? And a whole host of other guys. So this NXT is giving great opportunities to a lot of guys. And I'll tell you what, it's given a great opportunity to a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, was Brian Kendrick. Me and Brian Kendrick started on the road together, first day in the WWE. Brian Kendrick was young, got to WWE at a young age, and I watched his interview that he did talking about, like, this is like a second chance for him, and he said it himself about his first time around. Well, I really can understand what you're saying because, and you could ask Brian about it, I lived with his first time around. He was an awesome competitor, an awesome wrestler, but I think at times, like Tony Atlas has said, too much too soon. I think he was just too young. He was 23 years old. Next thing you know, he was on TV. Maybe, I don't want to say this wrong about him, maybe didn't appreciate what he actually had, at that young age, and he was phenomenal. He was doing great, and, after a few years, I was always saying to myself, like, what's the matter? You're doing great. And at times he was, miserable at times. And I'm like, well, you're here, but I think, and then he ended up getting released and that was it. And, he still kept on good terms because he's a great guy. But again, going back to my story is hearing that little interview he did in NXT when they asked him about his opportunity and he appreciates his second opportunity. He even said it about his first time around. And guys deserve second chances. Some guys deserve third chances, And I'm very proud of him, and I'm very happy for him, and I'm glad to see him, and things work out for him.
Well, I got two questions for you real quick, Guido, because you kind of touched base on both of them, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask these together. Do you have an odds-on favorite to win the Cruiserweight Global Series?
Well, obviously, if you're going to go with the veterans, if you're going to go with the veterans, it could be Tajiri, it could be Brian Kendrick, but I don't know if it's going to go that route. Now we all know professional wrestling is entertainment, so let's understand that. So hopefully they're using those guys to elevate guys, and I would say again like Tony Nese. I think he's phenomenal. I think he's phenomenal, and he's a great person. He's a good guy, and if you're going to come down to one person, and believe me, there's a lot of other guys. I'm trying to think fast. There's 30 guys in there, and there's a few other ones too. But if you're asking me for one guy, I think Tony Nese has what it takes. I think he's in phenomenal shape. He looks great, and he knows how to work. He knows what to do. He can tone it down when he has to, and he knows when to tone it up. And he tells a great story. He understands the business. He understands the philosophy of how a match goes, and how the flow of a match would go, and I would say, he would be my pick.
Okay, and the other question that I had for you, you know, you were talking about the WWE, the ECW One Night Stand. Do you feel that WWE or TNA put on a better reunion show for ECW?
Do I feel that TNA, the reunion? So that was the One Night Stand was WWE's reunion show, I would say, because I did so many reunion shows. I think for them.
Yes, sir.
The TNA one, I did the six-man tag.
Hardcore
about,
Justice,
right?
I think. Yeah, the Hardcore Justice.
Yeah, Hardcore Justice. Right. That was on. You know what's actually weird about that? I believe, and I might got this wrong. Hardcore Justice was August 8th, 2010. I actually got released, and I ended up doing that Hardcore Justice thing 8/8/10,
wow.
I believe. So I always remember that's you always remember when you get fired from a job. You know, it sucks. So, but I think it was just different. I mean, the good thing about it is both of them had the Tommy Dreamer feel because Tommy Dreamer was him and Paul Lee were part of the one in the 2005 in the Hammerstein Ballroom. And Tommy Dreamer had a big part of the one that we did, obviously, because he was working for TNA at that time. And Tommy Dreamer learned a lot from Paul Lee through the years and had a lot of the same intentions and ideas, I believe, that Paul Lee had. So I'll tell you, I think the fans, I enjoyed both of them. I really did. I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to actually say which one that was better. You know, I would have to go back and watch the shows, actually. You know, I could only go by my match. You know, I got to be honest, I never watched the whole 2005 One Night Stand. I watched my match, and I never really watched the whole Hardcore Justice. I watched my match. So
wow.
I can't really say I watched it. It was live. I did it there. I didn't come home and watch it. You know?
I've got to honestly say when we had Al Snow on a while back, I asked him the same question, and he said he couldn't pick either. You know, he couldn't pick either one. You know, which was better. You know, in his mind either. So I guess they both lived up to what they were supposed to live up to.
Well, that I do believe. You know, because I think I didn't hear any complaints about the 2005 One Night Stand we did, and that led into I think Vince McMahon wanting to bring ECW back. And if that show stunk, I don't think he would have done that. And I know we got a hell of a response for the Hardcore Justice, which they ended up bringing me and Tony back and a couple other guys. We didn't stay for too long, but we brought back. We worked with some of the guys. So, but at that time too, they had. I think Vince Russo was still there. So, you had certain guys pushing for the ECW product, and you might have had certain guys pushing that they didn't want the ECW product. You know, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that goes on, too. You know, that has a lot to do with it. Even if the show is great, it could be people not wanting it to work. That happens.
Now, the original full-blooded Italians were, J.T. Smith, Tommy Rich, Tracy Smothers, and yourself. You were the only one that was Italian. What was the gimmick originally supposed to represent?
Well, a lot of people first of all think that I was the first FBI member. I was the most longest-lasting FBI member, but the whole gimmick started with J.T. Smith. J.T. Smith was the full-blooded Italian. Obviously, here's a black guy that comes out singing Frank Sinatra. If you watch the early tapes before I even got there, coming out with the Italian flag, singing Frank Sinatra and "Fly Me to the Moon," and he thought he was Italian. Then when Paul Lee, when I first started there, I was wrestling as Damien Stone for a couple of months. Paul Lee was always saying, "Oh, you remind me of a Joe Pesci guy." You know what Joe Pesci is? He's a small guy, but thinks he can beat the world up. He's like, you got to be very, very hyper, very this. And he kept saying that. And then he thought of the idea and put me in with J.T. Smith, and we debuted me and J.T. debuted in Queens, New York at the Lost Battalion Hall. He came out doing his shtick first, and then I came out, and he supposedly got hit in the head but with a frying pan and woke up and thought he was Italian, and that was his cousin. So I came out trying to tell him, I'm your cousin, you don't remember me. If you go back and watch early episodes, you'll see that was on TV for ECW. And that's how the gimmick started. So the gimmick started before me. The gimmick started with J.T. Smith as a full-blooded Italian. He was by himself. And then they brought me in. And the only reason J.T. Smith left was he quit. He got a job in, Richmond, Virginia after, a year and a half. He quit and went to Virginia. And then Tommy Rich and Tracy Smothers at that time were in ECW. And, Paulie said, what the hell? We had a black guy. Why don't we throw some Southern guys with this group, too? And then they threw him in with me. And then we started the FBI again with me and Tracy and Tommy, And then after a couple of years, we brought in Kid Cash one time. We brought in Mabel, One Man Gang. We had a few FBI members come and go. Sal Balomo, he was with us for a little while, actually, Sal, if you remember that. He was the guy.
Yeah.
He was the Godfather, too, for a few episodes, a few months, I would say. And then once Tracy and Tommy left in, like, 1998, they brought in Big Sal Graziano, or 1999. Yeah. They left in, like, 99. They brought in Big Sal and Tony Mamaluke, and then there we were off and running again with a different version of the FBI. You know, and then it was me and Tony Mamaluke with Big Sal as our manager, Big Sal Graziano. And then when ECW closed, obviously I went to WWE, and then Zamboli and Chuck Palumbo. And then we reformed the FBI again. And that FBI, I'll tell you, in our first year and a half, we were feuding with all the top guys. We feuded with Undertaker. We did programs with Rikishi, programs with all the top guys. We were doing stuff with APA. We wrestled Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar. We were with everybody for the first year and a half, 2 years. You know, so that gimmick actually did a lot. And at one point, we had Vince McMahon hired us to help him during matches for a pay-per-view where it was him. I forget who he was actually. It was him and Undertaker did something, and then they had us come out to make the save. So we were involved in some great storylines in the beginning days of the FBI in the WWE.
I always thought that that version that Vince and Paulie used, that they based it off the Mafia, with you guys coming in, you know, and being the muscle.
Well, the WWE version.
Yeah, with Johnny Stamboli and.
Yeah. That was more than Marvelous. The one in WW in ECW was just more comical. The one in ECW is more comical because, you know, here you got me and a black guy as the full-blood Italian. He's not. We got me and two Southern guys. Obviously, he's not. Believe it or not, Chuck Palumbo could play off as Italian. Johnny Stamboli, he could play off as Italian. Here was the time there was actually maybe 3 Italians in a group, you know, or at least looked Italian, you know. So, and then we did that where we used to do the gambling and all that kind of stuff, you know, in the locker room. So, yeah, that was Mafia-based, but it was kind of like, it wasn't like serious Mafia-based. It was more like comical Mafia-based.
I thought it was a very legit version, and I thought maybe when I was watching at the time that the tag team titles would somehow get involved, but we all know what came to fruition. But I did think that was one of the more threatening versions of the full-blooded Italians.
Yes, absolutely. That was more threatening, 100%. And that all came part because when we were feuding with The Undertaker and we had to sit down with him at the table and, you know, we were beating him down and having competitive matches with him. Absolutely. And that's what just gave us credibility. You know, I understand what you're saying about the tag team titles. I mean, we wrestled Guerrero and Chavo many a times, and Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas, but, you know, creative never thought of putting the belts on us. You know, why? I have no idea. You know, if it was up to me, we would have the titles, but it wasn't up to me. So, why they didn't give those guys a chance, I think they should have myself, but what can you do?
I've got two FBI-related questions, full-blooded Italian questions for you, Guido. The first question, I've always wondered, is Sal Renaro, is that the same person as Rap Master PM News, or is that two different people?
Sal Graziano.
Sal Graziano.
Yes. Is that the same person as Rap Master PM News?
Rap Master who?
PM News. It used to be in WCW.
Oh, PN News. PN News. No, those are two different guys. No, that's not the same guy. No, I know PN News. Oh, yeah, PN News wrestled in ECW as PN News. Yeah, no,
okay.
That's definitely different people. I know both of them.
Okay, and the other question I had for you, why do you think that Tommy Rich wasn't involved in the Full-Blood Italians when they went over to WWE?
When they put well, I don't know. I mean, they when they reformed the Full-Blood Italians, when Paulie did it there, you know, Tommy Rich wasn't employed there. Paulie, I think, wanted it more serious, you know, and you know, Johnny Stamboli, you know, the big powerhouse, and like you said, Chuck Palumbo, you know, they didn't want to bring. It was like three Italians that were real Italians. They didn't. I don't think they wanted to bring comical. I mean, I can't really answer that question from knowing why. But I think that was Tracy Smothers, Tommy Rich. That was more or less the ECW version of the FBI. When I was in WWE, and when the creative wanted to form an FBI with me, and Paul Lee wanted to form it. They had Chuck Palumbo that maybe I don't think they were doing nothing with anymore. I think he just did that thing with Billy Gunn. I think that was over, and he was kind of hanging in the balance. And they just hired Johnny Stamboli came over from WCW, and he was in the Mamalukes. So he already kind of did the Italian thing too, which fans knew who he was from there, knew who I was from ECW. So I think that's why, I think that's why. I mean, I don't know that for a fact. I have no idea why he didn't bring Tommy Rich over to WWE. I have no idea,
What
was
the
beginning? That would have took. Hang on, that would have took my spot if you think about it. Because in the beginning of the FBI, I was the manager. It was kind of like those were the wrestlers. If you watch the beginning, I used to do 6-man tags with them, but they are the ones that used to do matches. For the first year, I used to come out in the leather jacket and just manage and be the antagonizer. Yep. And then at the end, everybody would get their hands on me. So that, the manager part was me, and I was a different type of manager than Tommy Rich was.
Yeah, so it's kind of good you did go over WWE, because then Tommy would have took your place, because he was at an ECW. I get what you're saying.
I don't know
on
for a
that.
fact, but I'm just saying he managed in ECW, me and somebody in the beginning version of WWE. I was a manager of Chuck and Johnny. I wasn't really the wrestler. I did wrestle in the beginning because when I started, I started with Jamie Noble, and we were wrestling. I was doing stuff with Tajiri. I was doing stuff with Crash Holly. I wrestled for the first year there. And then the second year there, they wanted to put me with a group, and that's when they formed the FBI. So I don't even think Tommy was thought of in a way.
My final question to you, Guido, I was going to ask you about if you would ever return to WWE, but you basically answered that earlier. But my final question to you is
there's no you never say never. But it would have to. It would be hard to go back as a talent when I'm kind of set right now, only because and to their credit, they can't always keep you as a talent. You can't. Once they're done with you, they're gonna release you. It's just the way it goes. And now, if they were gonna hire me as an employee is a different story. If the WWE wanted me, I still wrestle all the time on independence. I'm in the best shape of my life. If they want help from me, I can get off of work. I could help them. I live in the New York area. If they wanted it, I could go wrestle all their guys in at the Garden and Nassau Coliseum in Boston and in Albany. In the area I'm in, there's so many places they go. The county center. There's so many things they could bring me back. Watch shows, they could do that. Or bring as an employee. That's the only way I would look at going back. You never ever say never. I never close a door. I would never say I'd never go back to WWE, but it had to be in certain circumstances. Even that cruiserweight thing, that would be hard because in 6-7 months a year, if it's folding, not folding, I don't want to use the word folding, but if they're going another route with it and they just hired all these guys, and now they're going to let these guys go, and that's what they have to do. They can't say, well, Jamie, threw away a job for this. They're not going to think like that. I work hard in the real world. I got a pension. I got a retirement right now. I got things going on. So I would have to think hard about just going back. Now, if it's guys that have no jobs and they're just kind of hanging and lingering, of course you'd go back because even if it lasts a year, at least, okay, you got a job for a year. It depends on the person and the time when they want to bring you back. But I never would say never. I think there's a lot I could help the WWE with right now. But they have to ask me. I mean, I'm here. So.
What would you say that was the craziest match that you've ever had in your career on the indie scene, ECW, wherever? What was the craziest match you've ever had to fight?
Well, I mean, a lot of there's not just one because, like in ECW, the night we won the tag team titles from New Jack and Coronas. I mean, if you look at that, I've done matches like that night after night. I used to hate hearing New Jack's music because I knew the garbage can was coming. Oh, and here comes all the crap too. And then, we got hit with most of the stuff. Me and everybody else. So there was many of those type of matches that we did that you're getting hit with computers and keyboards and keyboard canes and stuff like that. But those are some of the best memories of my life also. That was the night I won the ECW tag team titles the first time. The night that New Jack actually put me through 2 tables at the ECW arena, I forget exactly what match it was. The Dudleys were involved in that match, and they put me on Stack. You could get it online. You could watch it. You could watch it right on the network probably. And New Jack, they hoisted him up, and he went to the top of the where you leap off, and then he leaped off and put me through 2 tables. You know, that was pretty crazy. But, you know, I got to say there's not just one. Not just one. I mean, in WWE, I didn't do too many crazy matches. I did good wrestling matches, good cruiserweight matches. Nothing like the Hardys and the Dudleys with the TLC matches that they did there, Dudley and all them. You know, I did nothing like that there. Most of my crazy stuff was in ECW. And on the Indies, I would never do crazy stuff because I wouldn't, for the money that you're making, you don't do crazy stuff. You just get through.
Absolutely.
I see we've got about 4 minutes left, Guido. I want to ask you if you have any upcoming appearances or anything like that you'd like to promote.
Yeah, I'm going to Chicago for Dreamwave. That's August 6th. I have I could promote some. Hang on, let me get my book though. I just happen to have it right here. Hang on,
okay.
I gotta look. I can't remember the stuff. So August is actually very busy for me. June was very busy, but I'm not going to promote those shows because those are gone. I just wrestled last week actually for Bo James, actually who just was in NXT. He ran a show up in Long Island. We all worked there. Me, he had Kurt Hawkins, he had El Torito, Bennett from TNA. He had a good show there. But August 6th, I'm in Chicago. I got a show for Matt August 19th in Brooklyn. True Wrestling, August 27th, me and Danny Doring. I believe that's in Pennsylvania. Got a show then. I got a Dreamwave again, October 1st. I'm wrestling in Queens, New York, October 15th for Jack Sabbath. I'm doing a convention in Philadelphia for Hardy, me and Mama Luke, the day of Dreamers show. I'm going back to Chicago September 3rd for Dreamwave again. September 10th, I got Staten Island. People would have to look these up, but you know, you're just asking me something. Clinton, Mass, October 29th. So as you can see, I keep busy. I keep very busy. Dreamwave again, November 5th. That's in Chicago. Tommy Fates is running a show November 12th. I'll be wrestling there, and that's in the Jersey area. And then and that's it. That's just nothing in December. So I still keep busy. I like still doing wrestling because it's my part-time job. I still make money, and you know I'm lucky enough to make good money on the outside of wrestling. Where if I don't want to take a show, I don't have to take it. You know, I don't rely on the money. I don't have to, because sometimes people want you to do daring things, and you know it has to fit what I want to do. I'm not going to go out there. You know, I make extra money. I'll entertain the fans, but I'm not going to put my life on the line and be doing these crazy things on the independents. You know.
I agree.
So,
I agree with what you're saying, Guido, and we want everybody go and check out those dates that he was talking about he's got coming up. We want to thank you so much for being on the WSE Lounge today, Guido, and we wish you the best of luck in all you do, sir.
all right. Thank you for having me. Take care.
You're very welcome. God bless.
This is Mike Mooneyham. I want to tell all you fans out there, don't miss the WSE Lounge. You'll be glad you caught this great show.